Okay, so what do dinner parties and supernatural abilities have in common? I know it sounds like the setup for a really weird joke, right? But believe it or not, the answer takes us right into the middle of a massive crisis, one that almost ripped a whole community apart 2,000 years ago.
Yeah, because back in the ancient city of Corinth, a place that was obsessed with status, both of those things, how you ate and what special abilities you had, they weren't just things. They became weapons in this all-out war for social supremacy.
And that's really the heart of what we're digging into today, all based on Dr. Dave Mathewson's incredible breakdown of the Apostle Paul's letter to this church. It's this wild story about a brand new church that was, well, starting to look a lot like the super competitive dog-eat-dog city right outside its doors. So to really get what was going on, you've got to understand the place itself. See, ancient Corinth was all about status. It was a city totally built on these socioeconomic lines. Who you were, how much money you had, your job, who you knew, all of it decided your spot on this really rigid social ladder. And here's the kicker. The central problem was that all those worldly values, that obsession with status and division, well, they weren't being left at the church door. Nope, they were seeping right in, infiltrating the community, and just poisoning the whole point of it. You can see this conflict play out so clearly during what was supposed to be a sacred meal, the Lord's Supper. I mean, this meal was meant to be all about unity. But instead, it became this perfect, ugly mirror of the social divides in Corinth. You had the rich members who could leave work whenever, showing up early, grabbing all the best food, while the poor members, who had to work late, would get there and find, well, not much. It was a total disaster. And Paul was, you can imagine, absolutely horrified. This symbol of unity was actually creating more division. And that right there is a fundamental clash of values. I mean, the church was supposed to be about equality, service, unity, but it was getting twisted and reshaped by these Corinthian values of status, wealth, and division. You know, it's a struggle any group can face, right? That gap between what you say you are and what you actually are. For them, this wasn't just some small disagreement. This was a battle for the very soul of their community. And believe it or not, this whole conflict over status didn't just stop at the dinner table. Oh no. It went from the physical to the supernatural, and suddenly, spiritual gifts became the new ultimate status symbols.
So what was the number one gift everyone wanted? Speaking in tongues. Now, why that one? Well, in a lot of the pagan religions at the time, this kind of ecstatic, heavenly language, it was seen as something only the spiritual and social elite could do. So for some of these Corinthians, getting this gift wasn't just a blessing from God. It was like a spiritual trophy. It was proof that they'd finally made it.
And as Dr. Mathewson points out, this was just a direct copy-paste of secular values into a spiritual setting. You had the rich, elite members basically saying, look, we're important out there in the city, and we're important in here in the church. And our ability to speak in tongues, that's the proof. Paul's response to this is honestly genius. It's so strategic. He doesn't say, stop it. No, he totally reframes the whole conversation. He lists out this whole bunch of different spiritual gifts, showing, hey, the Spirit works in tons of ways, not just this one flashy way. And then, and this is the masterstroke, he puts speaking in tongues at the very, very end of the list. It's this brilliant, subtle move to de-emphasize it and basically level the playing field for everyone. And then Paul delivers his final knockout punch. He's like, you want to know the real sign that someone has the Spirit, the true evidence? It's not some big, spectacular look-at-me gift. It's the simple, powerful confession that Jesus is Lord. That's it. Something anyone, rich, poor, slave, free, anyone could do. Game changer. So this brings Paul to his ultimate solution. Okay, if arguments over who's the best and who has the coolest gifts are tearing everyone apart, what on earth can bring them back together? Well, the answer he gives is pretty radical. He uses this amazing metaphor of the body. Think about it. A body can't just be one giant eyeball, right? Or one giant hand. That'd be useless. It needs every single part, no matter how small or unimportant it seems, to actually work. He's basically shouting at them, you are all essential. The foot is just as crucial to the body as the hand is. And right here, at the absolute peak of this whole argument about gifts and status, Paul hits the pause button, and he says, now let me show you a more excellent way. He's about to drop the ultimate antidote for all their arrogance and division. Now, you've probably heard this before. It's from the famous love chapter, 1 Corinthians 13. But here's the thing we often miss. In its original context, this is not some sweet, sentimental poem you read at a wedding. It's a surgical strike. It's a direct rebuke of their behavior. I mean, think about it. Every single line is a direct counter to what the Corinthians were doing. They were being boastful and arrogant. Well, love isn't. They were insisting on their own way. Love doesn't. Paul's whole point is that love completely changes the game. It changes the purpose of the gifts. When you're motivated by love, you don't use your talents to show off how great you are. No, you use them to serve and build up everyone around you. Love just fundamentally shifts the entire focus from me to we. Okay, so this internal mess over status was bad enough, but it gets deeper. It was also tied directly to how the Corinthians were thinking about their ultimate hope, about the future itself. So Paul tells them, look, when you guys get together, you should really want the gift of prophecy more than tongues. And the reason is simple. Speaking in tongues might make the individual speaker feel good, but prophecy, which is just speaking a clear, understandable message from God, that benefits everybody. It builds up the whole church. See, there it is again, that central theme of community over individual status. And this is where Paul's letter seems to take a sharp turn. All of a sudden, he dedicates this huge chapter to defending the idea of a physical, bodily resurrection, which might make you wonder, wait, why was this even up for debate? Well, it's because their spiritual elitism had gotten to their heads. They were influenced by all this Greek philosophy floating around that taught the physical body was basically a prison for the soul. So some of them started to think they had already arrived spiritually. Their thinking was like, hey, we've got these incredible spiritual gifts now. We're already living in perfection. Why on earth would we need a clumsy physical body in the future? Paul's response to this is just emphatic. He basically says the entire Christian faith hangs on a physical resurrection. He argues that if you deny that you'll have a future physical body, you're also denying that Christ was physically raised from the dead. And if that didn't happen, he says, then this whole thing is useless. Your faith is pointless. The final enemy is death, and you can only truly beat death with life in a real physical resurrected body. And this brings us right back around to the main theme of this whole letter, which Dr. Mathewson just sums up perfectly. Every single problem we've talked about in Corinth, the divisions at dinner, the obsession with status, the misuse of gifts, even denying the resurrection, it all came from one single root cause. They were letting the values of the culture around them define who they were as a church. So you see, Paul's letter isn't just some dusty old document. It's a timeless challenge. And it forces us to ask a really powerful question. What does it look like for any community in any time period to actually live by a different set of rules? What happens when you decide to build a culture not on status and self-promotion, but on a foundation of service, unity, and genuine love?